Successful, other manufacturers would have to build computers exactly like the IBM. They wanted to copy the IBM PC, to clone it. How could they do that legally? Well, welcome to the world of reverse engineering. This is what reverse engineering can get you if you do it right.
Well, the thing about Texas...
It's the modest Aspen, Colorado ski shack of Rod Canyon, one of the founders of Compaq, the company set up to compete head-on with the IBM PC. In 1982, Rod and three fellow engineers from Texas Instruments sketched out a computer design on a placemat at the House of Pies restaurant in Houston, Texas. They decided to manufacture and market a portable version of the IBM PC using the curious technique of reverse engineering.
Reverse engineering is figuring out, after something's already been created, how it ticks, what makes it work, usually for the purpose of creating something that works the same way, or at least does something like the thing you're trying to reverse engineer.
Here's how you clone a PC. IBM had made it easy to copy. The microprocessor was available off the shelf from Intel, and the other parts came from many sources. Only one part was IBM's alone, a vital chip that connected the hardware with the software. Called the ROM BIOS, this was IBM's own design, protected by copyright and by Big Blue's army of lawyers. Compaq had to somehow copy the chip without breaking the law.
First, you have to decide how the ROM works. So what we had to do is have an engineer sit down with that code and through trial and error write a specification that said, here's how the BIOS ROM needs to work. It couldn't be close. It had to be exact. So there was a lot of detail testing that went on.
You test how that all-important chip behaves and make a list of what it has to do. Now it's time to meet my lawyer, Claude. I've examined the internals of the ROM BIOS and written this book of to do the reverse engineering. In November 1982, Rod Canyon unveiled the result.
What I've brought today is a Compaq portable computer.
When Bill Murto, another Compaq founder, got a plug on a cable TV show, their selling point was clear: 100% IBM compatibility.
It turns out that all major and popular software runs on the IBM personal computer or the Compaq portable computer.
That extends through all of the software for IBM.
Yes.
It all works on the Compaq.
Compaq was an instant hit. In their first year, on the strength of being exactly like IBM, but a little cheaper, they sold 47,000 PCs.
In our first year of sales, we set an American business record, I guess maybe a world business record. Our largest first-year sales in history was $111 million.
So Rod Canyon ends up in Aspen, famous for having the most expensive real estate in America. The obvious winner at first was Intel, maker of the PC's microprocessor chip. Intel was selling chips like hotcakes to clone makers and making them smaller, quicker, and cheaper. This was unheard of. What kind of an industry had Big Blue gotten themselves into?
Things get less expensive every year. People aren't used to that in general. I mean, you buy a new car, you buy one now, 4 years later, you go buy one that costs more than the one you bought before. Here, this magical piece of an industry. You go buy one later, it costs less. And it does more. What a wonderful thing. But it causes some funny things to occur when you think about an industry where prices are coming down, where you have to sell it and use it right now, because if you wait later, it's worth less.
Where Compaq led, others soon followed. IBM was now facing dozens of rivals. Soon-to-be familiar names began to appear, like Amstrad, AST, and Dell. It was getting spectacularly easy to build a clone. You could get everything off the shelf, including a guaranteed virgin ROM BIOS chip. Each new clone maker, free of IBM's big overhead, took another bite out of Big Blue's business.
Well, they really hit with a vengeance in '85. The prices were going down on the competitive products at about 30% every 6 months. Terror would be a good, a good phrase.
Terror?
Oh, of course. I mean, it was getting. I mean, we were able to sell a lot of products, but it was getting difficult to make money.
And where did every clone maker buy his operating system? Microsoft, of course. By the mid-'80s, it was boom time for Bill. The teenage entrepreneur had predicted a PC on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software. It was actually coming true. As Microsoft mushroomed, there was no way that Bill Gates could personally dominate thousands of employees. But that didn't stop him. He still had a need to be both industry titan and top programmer. So he had to come up with a whole new corporate culture for Microsoft. He had to find a way to satisfy both his adolescent need to dominate and his adult need to inspire. From the beginning, Microsoft recruited straight out of college. They chose people who had no experience of life in other companies. In time, they'd be called microserfs.
And so a lot of young, I say people, but mostly it was young men who just were out of school, saw him as this incredible role model or leader, almost a guru, I guess. And they could sit and spend hours with him, and he valued their contributions, and there was just a wonderful camaraderie that seemed to exist between all these young men and Bill. And the strength that he has in this, and his will and his desire to be the best and to be the winner, and he is just like a cult leader, really.
As the frenzied 80s came to a close, IBM reached a watershed. They had created an open PC architecture that anyone could copy. This was intentional, but IBM always drew a nightmare as IBM lost its dominant market share. So in a big gamble, they staked their PC future to a new system, a new line of computers with proprietary closed hardware and their very own operating system. It was war.
Start planning for Operating System 2 today.
IBM planned to steal the market from Gates with a brand new operating system called, drumroll please, OS/2. IBM would design OS/2, yet they asked Microsoft to write the code. Why would Microsoft help create what was intended to be the instrument of their own destruction? Because
it was just part of, as we used to call it at the time, riding the bear. You just had to try to stay on the bear's back, and the bear would twist and turn and try to buck you and throw you, but darn, we were going to ride the bear because the bear was the biggest, the most important. You just had to be with the bear. Otherwise, you would be under the bear in the computer industry, and IBM was the bear, and we were going to ride the back of the bear.
But it's easy for people to forget how pervasive IBM's influence over this industry was. When you talk to people who've come into the industry recently, there's no way you can get that into their head. That was the environment.
the relationship between IBM and Microsoft was always a culture clash. IBMers were buttoned-up organization men. Microsofties were obsessive hackers. With the development of OS/2, the strains really began to show.
In IBM, there's a religion in software that says you have to count K-locks, and a K-lock is 1,000 line of code. How big a project is it? Oh, it's a 10 K-lock project. This is a 20 K-locker, and there's a 50 K-locks. And IBM wanted to sort of make it the religion about how we got paid, how much money we made off OS/2, how much they did. How many K-locks did you do? And we kept trying to convince them, hey, if we have a developer who's got a good idea and he can get something done in 4 K-locks instead of 20 K-locks, should we make less money? Because he's made something smaller and faster, less clocks. Oh, K-locks, K-locks, that's the methodology. Yeah, anyway, it almost makes my back just crinkle up at the thought of the whole thing.
When I took over in '89, there was an enormous amount of resources working on OS/2, both in Microsoft and the IBM company. Bill Gates and I met on that several times. And we pretty quickly came to the conclusion together that that was not going to be a success the way it was being managed. It was also pretty clear that the negotiations and the contracts had given most of that control to Microsoft's.
It was no longer just a question of styles. There was now a clear conflict of business interest. OS/2 was planned to undermine the clone market, where DOS was still Microsoft's major moneymaker. Microsoft was DOS, but Microsoft was helping develop the opposition? Bad idea. To keep DOS competitive, Gates had been pouring resources into a new program called Windows. It was designed to provide a nice, user-friendly facade to boring old DOS. Selling it was another job for shy, retiring Steve Ballmer.
how much do you think this advanced operating environment is worth? Wait just 1 minute before you answer. Watch as Windows integrates Lotus 123 with Miami Vice. Now we can take this for...
Just as Bill Gates saw OS/2 as a threat, IBM regarded Windows as another attempt by Microsoft to hold on to the operating system business.
We created Windows in parallel. We kept saying to IBM, hey, Windows is the way to go, graphics is the way to go. And we got virtually everyone else enthused about Windows.
It was clear that IBM had a different vision of its relationship with Microsoft than Microsoft had of its vision with IBM. Is that Microsoft's fault? You know, maybe some, but IBM's not blameless there either. So I don't view any of that as anything but just poor business on IBM's part.
Bill Gates is a very disciplined guy. He puts aside everything he wants to read and twice a year goes away for secluded reading weeks. The decisive moment in the Microsoft-IBM relationship came during just such a retreat. In front of a log fire, Bill concluded that it was no longer in Microsoft's long-term interest to blindly follow IBM. If Bill had to choose between OS/2, IBM's new operating system, and Windows, he'd choose Windows.
We said, ooh, IBM's probably not going to like this. This is going to threaten OS/2. Now, we told them about it. Right away, we told them about it. But we still did it. They didn't like it. We told them about it. We told them about it. We offered to license it to them. We always thought the best thing to do is to try and combine IBM promoting the software with us doing the engineering. And so it was only when they broke off communication and decided to go their own way that we thought, okay, we're on our own. And that was definitely very, very scary. And we were in a major negotiation in early 1990, right before the Windows launch. We wanted to have IBM on stage with us to launch Windows 3.0, but they wouldn't do the kind of deal that would allow us to profit. It would allow them essentially to take over Windows from us, and we walked away from the deal.
Switch to CD-ROM.
Jack Sams, who started IBM's relationship with Microsoft with that first call to Bill Gates in 1980, could only look on as the partnership disintegrated.
Then they